Welcome to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm your host, Derrick Broze. With every episode of the Activation, we will explore solutions in the areas of health, permaculture, decentralized technology, spirituality, and hidden truths. The Activation Podcast is focused on providing cutting-edge solutions to empower humanity. Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze. Welcome to another episode of the Activation Podcast. You know, the reason I started this podcast over 2.5 years ago was because I was exhausted with constantly covering the news every week and only reporting on you. Here's this new crazy banking thing. Here's this new police thing. Here's some environmental destruction. And all the things that we know are happening and do have a place, do have a time where we should be discussing them and thinking about them. But personally, I'm just exhausted of only talking about solutions. And today, I think this is going to be a conversation that really is, it's an example of why I started this podcast. And if you haven't listened to the previous 23, 24 conversations, I encourage you to go back, because every single one of these conversations with journalists, activists, permaculturists, just awesome individuals, is focused on solutions and how we can try to create a better world. And my guest today is Tag, who I just met a couple weeks ago. How are you doing, brother?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me. It's an honor. I've been following you for a while, and you've kind of guided our community in a lot of ways. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you for letting me know that. And, I truly mean what I was just saying, that it's just, there's so much garbage in the world, and some of it we need to kind of keep an eye on because it helps us be better prepared and be wiser and all those kinds of things. But for the most part, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of channels and content creators who are happy to spew fear porn and doom porn into our eyes and ears and mouths if we allow it to. And I really just want to focus on positive things. In fact, we met just a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta at the Next Steps conference, and I was saying at that event, for those who heard my talk there, that I only do events now that are solutions focused, and I really only want to do interviews that are solutions focused. As a journalist, sometimes I got to report on the bad things that are happening to try to inform people so they can come to the solutions. But for the most part, these are the conversations that matter to me. Those are the kind of events that matter to me. And it was a really great honor to meet you in person after recently learning about your work. So before we get into all the things you're doing, maybe you can just give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of what brings you to where you're at today and why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, we joke about this all the time. I'm a recovering, financial executive, meaning that, for many, many years I was, in the system, and, I worked for a large financial holding company. I had 900 employees. We had doing business and had operations in 32 states, and I managed the revenue side of the company. So that was to the tune of about $150 million. And everything was great, provided a great life, et cetera, et cetera. And then, one day they came to me and said, hey, we want to start mandating the vaccine for all our employees. How do you feel? I put up a little bit of a fight. And a little while later, they came back and said, nope, regardless, we're still going to do it. And so I took the stage, and what they thought was going to be me mandating everything to everybody, but I kind of bucked the system and ended up being escorted off the stage and lost my career of 25 years. And, it was crazy going from this, huge income and this one life, one day, to just being unemployed for the first time in my life, another time. But, once that happened, I kind of woke up and said, heck, I can't live in a life where one person controls so much of my destiny that I got to control my own. And so, me and my wife, we decided we would take all of our money out of the markets and we would cash in everything, and ended up building myself a 5,000 square foot super off-grid home on a big piece of property. And, today we're growing food and raising animals and, living free with, I got no debt and no mortgage, no electric bill, no water bill, no sewer bill, none of those kinds of things. So, just keep, currently we're just, continuing to try to, live free. And that brought me to community and ultimately to you, Derrick.
Yeah, I want to get into all that in just a moment, but I want to pick a little more into your story because I heard you share this story at Next Steps. So, you explain how, eventually you're forced out because you didn't want to approve or be a part of a decision to vaccinate the employees. And you mentioned at Next Steps that one of your areas of expertise, let's say, it was risk analysis, and you were kind of trying to bring that to the company, right? And telling them that this wouldn't be a wise move. Could you talk more about that? Like if you, whatever you feel like sharing, like the details of, like, were you already questioning or kind of concerned about vaccine dangers, or was that not even in your horizon and this was kind of the moment that it came to be?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I've always kind of questioned those things, and I've always kind of been a little bit that way anyway, but my decision really had nothing to do with that. Because what I felt like was, first of all, that we didn't own the employee. And I felt that if we were going to require somebody to inject something into their body, especially at the experimental level, that risk would be too great for the company. And we could get into violating HIPAA laws and lawsuits down the road. And what if there's a side effect? And so I really felt that the decision to mandate it was just going to open up the company and ultimately the shareholders, to all of these risks. But really for me, it was just a tyranny issue. I don't think that an employer owns the employee. I think it's fine to say, hey, you have to wear a mask. I think it's fine. I mean, that's up to a company, right? It's fine to practice social distancing, but it's not okay to mandate that they inject something into their body. And so that's the reason I took the stand. Derrick, but to go back, I'm kind of an anti-vaxxer a little bit myself, in that I think that, the body's a pretty strong thing by itself. But I wasn't going to mandate my beliefs on the employees, as I didn't want to mandate it upon me. And so I really took the stand more from a tyranny perspective than I took it from a vaccination perspective.
So, I mean, which again, I appreciate the kind of the principle underneath it, which is hopefully a principle that everyone in this audience would share, which is, as you were kind of stating there, that every individual owns their body, right? And maybe a boss can say, like, we encourage you to stay 6 feet apart, or, wear a mask for the safety of others. And maybe even that's debatable, but to go to the point of saying, putting an experimental, clearly not long-term tested substance into your body at the cost of your job was a line that you weren't willing to cross. And to, on one hand, let's say, or one perspective, to the detriment of you, right? Like you mentioned, losing career, losing the financial stability that comes along with that. But I mean, would you say it's something that in the end has worked out, for the better? Or was there a period where you were kind of like, what the hell am I going to do next? Or how did that transition work from you, from like going from that life to where you are now?
Yeah, at first it was hard because all I knew was what I knew, working in the financial world. And I was very concerned about how we were going to make it and all of those things. But I'll tell you, now looking back at it, they did me this huge favor. And I almost should be thankful to them in a lot of ways for this, because I'm truly living free. I sleep through the night just fine. I'm not up 5 times. I'm not stressed out. And then furthermore, it allowed me to deploy my resources to go to places like Next Step and to do, these other things to promote freedom, and to get out there and talk to people and tell them that it's okay, to be disobedient, and it's okay to say no. So I think from that perspective, it was great. It took me a little bit, obviously, you go from a suit and tie to a pitchfork, and that transition, I think, was hard for me for a little bit. But now looking back at it, I mean, I'm peaceful, and, I go to bed at night and nobody can take anything from me, and it's a good gig. And, I'd kind of like to thank them, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you for pushing you towards probably where you really want to be. And so, I mean, let's now go to like your new life, right? Like you leave that. There's some transitionary period, probably a little bit of grieving, I'm sure, because even if you feel like it was a better position to be in now, that was your life. That was your daily routine. What was like the moment post being let go and being, leaving the company, that you decided you wanted to start a YouTube channel? We'll talk more about that in a moment, but start getting closer to the land. Like, was that already sort of in the background for you while you were doing the suit and tie, or was this like a complete transition?
No, it was already in the background, Derrick. I mean, my wife's a super gardener, and so we've been gardening for many, 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 many years. And I was a little bit of a prepper anyway, and so those things came very naturally to me. But being able to do it full time, and and I know this because of the life, that you live, but the ability to produce all of your own food is quite the monumental task. And so it was really just taking it from a small scale to a large scale. Like, that transition was, I think, super easy for us. I don't know if you wanted me to answer why I did the YouTube or not, or if you wanted that to wait, but.
No, you can go ahead and get into that. Let's talk about the YouTube channel. Let everybody know the name and how that came about.
Yeah. So after they pissed me off, I really decided it was time to take the fight to them. And then I was no longer going to hide behind the scenes, and I wasn't going to wait for somebody else. I was going to get on the offense. And so first thing I did was build a YouTube channel. It's called Life Done Free. And it's on YouTube. And really pretty much the videos we produce is kind of a little bit of a mix match. We talk about, like, I'm getting ready to post one on soap making here pretty quick that my wife just made. But I also do a lot of Starve the Beast videos and, videos on the EGS system and the Great Reset and, stuff that I learned from people like you, Derrick. I mean, so I do a lot of those kinds of things, but it was really an effort for me to begin to fight back, which ultimately created freesteading, which ultimately got me to all these people want me to come, speak about all of it. I never really looked at it as a, a revenue source. I never really looked at it as anything like that other than a way to voice my anger, really in the beginning. And now my pleasure of thank you for setting me free. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does, and I'm excited to check out the soap making video because it just reminds me of the kind of things that my grandmother taught me. My grandma is 80, just turned 87 a couple of weeks ago. She's grown up on a farm. She still lives on her farm, and going to visit her at the farm, and every couple of months getting sent packages from grandma of all the canned veggies she's been making. And when I started an activist group in Houston back in 2010, we would do all kinds of different activism every month. So that might be the sort of things people are used to, like protesting and rallying and stuff. But very quickly we realized that wasn't the focus that we wanted. Like, okay, if there's a need to go protest, like we'll be out there, we'll hold the signs, we'll raise our voices. But really we wanted to be proactive and solutions focused. I mean, that's always been a focus of mine since the beginning. And so we had a community house and we would do monthly skill shares, and we would just invite anybody in the community, like, you got something to share, let us know. We'll arrange the event, we'll promote it through our channels, invite people out, and of course we would record it, and then we would upload it to our Houston Freethinkers YouTube channel, which is still out there somewhere, people can find it. And we have a playlist of skill shares, and we did everything back in the day from having my grandma come teach us how to make bread, how to can veggies, how to make soap, knot tying, how to build your own water filtration system, just all kinds of fun things that you realize that, wow, we have so many talented people in our communities, and I mean that like internationally, but also when you start looking locally and you really do start to build community, you realize that even people who might not think they have anything to offer, they already have skills that are kind of second nature to them that are still valuable. And by passing those on, then each of us gets stronger. Each of us become more useful, more valuable. And it's not like we got to depend on Tag to do everything because he's got all the skills and we're all just leaning on him. Instead, those skills are kind of multiplied and distributed throughout the community. So it's really, really awesome to see and hear that. And you mentioned the Great Reset and, of course, ESG and stuff like that. These are components that I think most of my audience is probably familiar with. But have like, as you've started to question those kind of things, have you felt like you've lost anything, like in terms of friendships? Or obviously we talked about like losing the job and the money, but I mean, are there still people, for example, that from your previous life that are now like, Tag, you lost your mind? Or maybe this is just something they expected from you all along?
Yeah, well, I'm quite the rebel, but I think they would have expected it. But there's some of them, like there's a couple of the board members that I originally served with who I still talk to, and they're kind of changing their minds in some ways. And so I think that's nice. But yeah, I've had the other side too, the CEO, the guy that mandated all of this stuff, the chief operating officer, I was great friends with and been in their homes, know their families. If their kids see me on the street, they would greet me by name, and in that who we don't even talk anymore. And they think I'm completely nuts and don't understand what's the big deal. And but it's because they've never stood on a principle and they've never, drawn a line in the sand and said, I shall go no further. And so, yeah, it's cost me a lot. And even in my other life, in the the homesteading world, I've lost friends because of this endeavor, because they think I should be hiding in a closet, and I no longer will hide, and I'm going to speak out, and it's just what it is. And so kind of I've lost them there. But the other side to that is I've gained some amazing friends. Derrick, being able to meet you was an honor to me. And other ones, like Luis Milliman, who I met at, Next Step. We now talk all the time. Kelly Blackwell, who stood up to the medical system in Great Britain. We now talk all the time. So I have gained far more than I've lost, but I've certainly lost.
Well, that's good to hear. And I feel like that's kind of like par for the course for those of us who, just go through various life changes, whether that's losing a job or for me, it was going to prison. Sometimes people, they get a sick family member and it causes them to change everything. Sometimes you feel like, okay, well, I got friends and family people from my old life who don't really understand, but we tend to gain more people who think similarly and who are also focused on solutions. And I think that's really what matters, because it feels like when you actually have people who are around you, and we realize, like, just you and I, for example, I mean, we could sit here and probably get deeper into the ways that we're different, right? And the things that we don't agree on. But instead, like the principles, the values of bodily autonomy, individual liberty, wanting to focus on solutions, wanting to build community. And community, of course, is a broad word. And those communities are going to look different. There will be true diversity in that way, not the buzzword kind of fake diversity they sell us. Like, to me, that's valuable because we find common ground on things that actually matter, as opposed to just like, my friends are people that I like to watch sports with, and not to say anything wrong with sports, but that's not the only bond that brings us together, right? But for a lot of people in their daily lives, I think it is more superficial things like that. Like, oh, we like the same music, or we like this movie, or we work together. But when you really get into the details, that we're encouraged, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, or don't talk about anything controversial. You get into it, you start to realize, like, maybe I'm surrounding myself with people who don't actually have the values that I want to be surrounded by, right? And I think that the last few years have pushed more of us to say, you know what, I'd rather give up certain things if it means being around people who actually understand who I am and, you know, actually can have real conversations that matter.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. You know, it's the journey of freedom has been a hard one for me, Derrick, a little bit, because I've had to really soul search what that really meant. And, you know, it's funny, when I started this journey, when the whole COVID thing was going on, you know, an agorist, I didn't even know what it was. I mean, this is all new learning to me, and I'm reading all the time, trying to understand it and, you know, trying to wrap my head around it. And this is why people like you have been a leader to me, is because it helps me learn, you know, those kind of things. But I think what I've come to in all of this is that freedom only works if it works both ways. You know, it can't work with, you know, the religious right that says this is the only way to act, or, you know, even the atheist on the other side, this is the only way to act. And we've got to, I think, learn through it a little bit altogether. But I mean, I would defend anyone's right to live their life according to their terms and according to their, you know, definition. You know, you talked about differences, and I think you and I will line up very good on most things. You know, I struggle on the spiritual side a little bit, and it's something I'm trying to learn, you know, to get through. But really, you know, beyond that point, I think doing for yourself, being self-reliant, being free, challenging those things, practicing those things every day is something that I think all of these communities would stand on. Everyone.
Hold that thought. Hey everyone, I want to tell you about something new that I've launched this year and that's going to continue to grow in 2023. On theconsciousresistance.com, we recently launched TCRU, the Conscious Resistance University, and the first course we're hosting is my investigative journalism course, How to Become an Independent Investigative Journalist, which is now available to anyone to access. I previously did this class live. I had 14 students, and it's a 6 weeks course where I give you all of the skills that I have, all the skills that I've learned over the last 13 years as an independent investigative journalist. We talk about how to conduct interviews. We talk about the history of journalism, key terms you should know, investigative tools, research tools. We talk about how to use social media, how to start your own website. And also I give you a chance to complete a project and send it to me, which I will publish on theconsciousresistance.com as well as through my independent media partners. Now, I really encourage you to check it out. You can go to theconsciousresistance.com/TCRU. And this is the first course we're offering. Right now, there are plans to bring in several new courses in the coming months. These are going to include privacy courses on blockchain and cryptocurrency and using the internet just in a safe way. We're also going to hear some meditation courses from my partner Miriam. There's plans for potential courses about Spanish speaking and so much more. So I encourage you guys to sign up right now and to stay tuned for the courses that are coming. Again, the website is theconsciousresistance.com/TCRU. Now let's get back to the conversation. Absolutely. Well, before we talk about your community, maybe let's talk just one more question on your channel. You mentioned the soap making, and I've seen some of the other videos you shared. What would you recommend, like if somebody's going to go check out your channel, which hopefully everybody here will do once this conversation wraps up, where would you recommend they start? I mean, just pick up wherever you're at right now. Are there any particular videos or things that you think are a good introduction to what you focus on or the kind of content you're putting out?
Yeah. So, you know, the video that's pinned in there is the video of my story and how I went through this whole COVID debacle. So if that interests people, it'd be there. But I think there's so much more to it. You know, I built a water system that uses 3 water sources, a well, a pond, and rainwater, and it all merges together in my house. And my wife can use it at any appliance in any part of the house. She can use them differently. They're not dependent on each other. So if you're looking at getting at water, that's a big one. I've got videos out there on my solar system. You know, I'm 100% off grid, and you know how it works, or even building the house. You know, we built our own house ourselves. I didn't pay for anything to be done. So I think it depends on what people are looking for. You know, my wife, her videos are way more centered on food. she grows food and makes cheese and bread and soap and shampoo and conditioner and, deodorant and, whatever, or her bees. So I just think it depends what someone's interested in. But if you want to follow the story, I'd start with the first video because that kind of tells how I got where I am.
Perfect. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of good practical knowledge in there. I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. And I was going to go jump into your community, but let's put that off because one other thing I want to make sure we mention is freesteading. I mean, we hadn't even talked about this yet, but for those who are following and are aware of the website that I've been involved with, the movement, the Freedom Cell Network, freedomcells.org, what Tag is doing with freesteading.com is very similar. He's focused on the U.S. and you have different groups we can talk about. But as far as if you're looking for people, and let's say you've joined freedomcells.org and you've searched the maps and you haven't found anybody in your local area yet, maybe they haven't heard of Freedom Cells yet, I would recommend going to freesteading.com and sign up there, check out your state group in the U.S. and start looking for people there. Because if you're looking for folks who care about sharing skills and beekeeping and making soap and all the fun things that are happening here, generally speaking, solutions, trying to empower ourselves, freesteading.com is just another place that has similarly minded people. So tell us about that, how it got started, and what your goal is with it.
Yeah. So once I got through, I built my homestead, and it's still a work in progress. But as we got all that kind of settled down, I began to think about what's next for us. And I'm a big believer in the the parallel society, in that if we could network a whole bunch of these communities together, we could create commerce. And not even really saying no to the man, just ignoring the man and just doing it for ourselves. And so how do I do that? And how do I begin to do that? So we created what we called freesteading.com. And we picked the name freesteading. I think it's important that everyone knows, because it matters a lot to me, at least, is that I believe that, all prepping leads to homesteading ultimately, because you can only store so much food. But I think eventually all homesteading will lead to freesteading, which is where you really begin to focus on your economy and you begin to really focus on freedom. So anyway, we named that, and it's 100% free, costs nothing to go in there. Inside of freesteading, there's a group page for every single state in a lot of countries. I think we're up to 40 different countries now. Don't quote me on that, but right about there. And we launched it in the beginning of September, and there's I think we're 16,000 or 18,000 members now. And it's a great place to yoke up, as my shirt says, right? Yoke up, with other community leaders. And we did it, and we pay for it. Our community pays for 100% of the costs of it, so that no one has to pay. But what it allows people to do is, again, just to build community. And I think it is the single most important topic that everybody should be talking about, is how that works, because we're never going to be able to do it alone, and we need each other.
Absolutely. And as I said at Next Steps, that there's no ego or competition in this for me or the Freedom Cell team. Like, we're all, we've met you, I've met other people in other countries. I just had a meeting with the other day with a gentleman who's doing something very similar to what we're both doing, but he was doing it back in the 90s, and now he's got the software and he wants to pass it on to somebody else to use it, right? There are other people who've been getting the download, getting the message of, we need to come together, we need to localize, we need to decentralize, we need to, as you're saying, we need to create our own local parallel economies, because the answer is not going to try to overthrow the government or storm the Capitol or to throw bricks through windows or to just throw your hands up and say, hey, we're screwed, there's nothing we can do. The answer is to become more empowered, to become more independent, to become more community reliant, interdependent, and self and family dependent as possible. And through Freedom Cells and through freesteading and other projects like this, I think this is where it's going to happen. So again, everybody, I encourage you to go to freesteading.com, sign up. And it's cool. I didn't even know that. I thought it was mainly just based in the U.S., so that's cool to hear you have country groups as well. So we have an international audience here. I'm sure there's some who are listening from outside the U.S. Again, it does apply to you. Go check it out, freesteading.com. Yeah, and that's exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's kind of the exciting part about that. Like for me, I've been promoting this idea, just getting together locally, and particularly with Freedom Cells, like small local decentralized groups, and trying to bridge these groups together into a larger network that could one day realistically be a parallel network where people can use the maps on the websites, ours, yours, and others, to connect with like-minded people as they travel, to connect with the organic, non-GMO, vaccine-free foods, and where people are going to be welcomed and bodily autonomy respected. Those are the kind of places and people we want to get connected. And so we know they're out there. It's just about how do we bring that all together. And I feel like that's the early stages that we're at now, is so many of us, like yourself and myself, getting connected, and then the fruit that comes from those relationships. And then, hanging out with Jim Gale at Next Step as well. And Jim's doing amazing things. Like, the more of us that get connected, the more organizations and think tanks and people who are bringing this together, we are building the parallel economy. And I do want to invite everybody out there who's listening to this, that this isn't a passive thing, though. I mean, you heard Tag's story. This wasn't like he sat around and just waited for the community and the soap making to land in his lap. He's being proactive, putting his life, his money, his energy, his body into this. And that's what everybody out there needs to. Myself and our team, we're doing the same thing, working on getting our land out here in Mexico. And even if you're in a position where you're sitting in an apartment right now, you're got some credit card debt, student loan debt, etc., and this feels so far away from you, I promise you there are steps that you can take to start, getting yourself prepared. And even if that's like buy some herbs and put them on the windowsill and learn to take care of those, like, you're going to be better off than the person who chooses to do nothing, right? Like, and on that Tag, any kind of beginner tips for people who are maybe just starting this journey and they're excited, they're interested, they're motivated, but maybe just don't know where to start, or maybe they're starting off with not so much on the financial end, and just anything you could offer to them?
Yeah, I get a lot of people who talk about how it must be nice to have resources to be able to go do that, because I live in a big house with big systems and all of this stuff. But I'm going to tell you a story about a guy that I know. His name's Jake, and Jake was a guy who was $70,000 in debt, going through a bankruptcy, going through a divorce. Ended up, not having a house, all of these things. And fast forward 13 years later, he lives on a 140-acre homestead, completely debt-free, and he did it. And he did it not necessarily from zero. He did it from negative 70,000 and pulled it off. And so I think the advice that I would give everybody is, and the most important advice I would give everybody, is get around someone who's done it. Get around people who are living it. Go to festivals. Go to these things. Be involved in communities. They're everywhere, guys. I'm telling you, there is a homesteading community in every state. You just got to find it, track it down, get involved. And if you can't find one, get your neighbors involved. Just take a step, do something. Grow an herb, as Derrick was talking about in there. Build something. But reach out to somebody, find someone who's already doing it. And I promise you, you can absolutely do it. Here's the thing, though. You just got to be committed to it. You got to want it more than you want the new refrigerator. You got to want it more than you want the Starbucks. You got to want it, all of them. You can have safety or you can have freedom, but you can't have both. Just take a step.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, and it's similar to something I wrote in the second edition of How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, when trying to describe the process of, like, say if somebody wants to become unbanked or they want to start a homestead. I mean, it's pretty much the same regardless. And one of the examples I give, because I try to empathize with that, the fact that some of the people who come to this content, or maybe who are aware of the things going on in the world, are working class people who are maybe working 70, 80 hours a week, for somebody else, not even for their own businesses and their own projects, right? And so they have ideas, they have ambition. Maybe they're listening to these podcasts on the headphones while they're working for somebody else, or they, listen in the little bit of free time they got when they come home. And even in that position, as you were saying, Tag, if you put this before everything else and you decide, okay, I'm not going to the bar this weekend to spend $50 on drinks. I'm going to stop buying that $8 coffee every day, I'm going to get rid of the Netflix for a few months, and all these little extra costs that you are already probably paying for, which are taking away income that could be used towards these goals. If you're serious about that, and even when you come home from your 12-hour shift and you're dead exhausted, but you got, 2 hours or so you can spare, put in an hour of research for permaculture. And then in 7 days, you got 7 new hours of information that you didn't have if you didn't take those steps, right? And then a month, you've got over 30 hours of that knowledge. You could be an expert before you know it, just by taking 1 hour extra a day, even though you're exhausted, even though you'd like to get to bed, just to put it towards that goal. And as you're doing that, as you were saying, Tag, you're going to start meeting other people who are doing this. Maybe you'll meet local groups. The transition starts to happen. Before you know it, you're getting offered opportunities to maybe come volunteer on the weekend so you can gain more of those hands-on skills. That turns into something where you end up making an income, right? Like, the transition does happen, and before you know it, you could be, getting some acreage. Maybe you're not going to have a 5,000 square foot house per se, but you're going to have something that you can call your own. Maybe you will have the 5,000 square foot house. It's really about what you put into it. And, I think this is just so crucial right now, because there's a lot of people who pay attention to content like myself and others, the journalists who are bringing the good information, but they allow it to kind of scare them into a place of paralysis, and they don't do anything. They're just like, oh, everything's screwed, or where do I start? I don't even know where to begin. And so a month passes and a year passes, and they keep hearing, oh, there's CBDCs coming, oh, there's a great reset. And before they know it, like, they haven't done anything. So, I mean, again, this is not an attempt to shame anybody in the audience or anything like that, but it is an attempt to say, get your shit in gear if you want to see real changes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's okay.
Exactly.
That's how you're going to learn. And it's nothing that I have done on my property is hard. Nothing that I have done is impossible. I didn't know anything about it, but I did exactly what you did. You told everybody to do. I went and I got out and I researched and I read and I read and I read and I read and I talked to people who came before me, and I got those skills to where I could go do it. And today it works just fine. So everybody can do it, regardless of your income. Regardless, you can absolutely take a step at freedom.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, Tag, I wanted to talk more about your community and how you are doing it, right? You not only left the job and started a YouTube channel where you're promoting these ideas and talking about them, and started homesteading. I mean, that would have been already amazing if if you'd stopped there. But you're a part of this incredibly huge community that I'm looking forward to visiting soon. Tell us about that, how the community came together, what your role is in that, and maybe if people are interested, I don't know if you're still looking for new members, maybe how they can, get in touch.
Yeah. So a little bit of a long story, but I try to make it quick for you. So years ago, we created a thing called the Midwest Preparedness Project in an effort to grow our community. Because at the time, we were coming out of a community that kind of formed underneath this banner of we'll all be on the same piece of property and we'll all do this same thing. And it just didn't work out. And so when we were coming out of that, we said, hey, let's go focus on the greater community. And so we built this thing called the Midwest Preparedness Project. And it's on Facebook, MeWe, all kinds of things. And we started having these get-togethers twice a year. And it just continued to grow and continue to grow and continue to grow until eventually, I think we just crossed 1,000 members in that community. But inside of that community, then, not all of them are active. And sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. There's about 200 that are pretty active that we see, very, very regular. But then inside of that, and I refer to this as the crew, the mag, and the mind, if anyone's curious. But anyway, inside of that, we have our crew. And there's about, 50 or 60 people who, we're putting up barns together, and we're putting up firewood together, and we're harvesting together, and, we're harvesting animals together. We're doing all of these things together. And I think what makes this model work so much better than any one that I've ever experienced before is, the issue of sovereignty and being ungovernable. Let me explain what I mean by that, because I think this is super, super important. So out here in our community, everybody owns their own land. If they get irritated or something bothers them, they just go home. It's not like, everyone's on one piece of property or whatever it is. And so I think that's a big thing. But I think the other thing is what we've learned is to make it ungovernable. There is no rules. We don't have any set of rules. We don't have any of that. If you want your voice heard, then be involved. If you don't, if your voice isn't heard, well, it's because that's your fault because you weren't involved. And so we'd get together all the time. Sometimes it's as simple as a barter town where everybody gets together, brings all their goods, and we barter amongst each other. Sometimes we do what's called the Freeman Festivus between November and between Thanksgiving and Christmas every year to kind of take the pressure off the holidays. Just a huge potluck, and everybody gets together and eats. We do 2 campouts a year where we all get together. But the magic to me is really what happens outside of all of those events. And, it just wasn't long ago, I had 50 people on my property and we were putting up firewood. I'm getting ready to go level a barn place for another guy, bring my skid steer over there and do it. And once we kind of got to this mass of about 40 or 50 people, it really began to grow. I mean, I added, last year from other states, not even counting in our community, but out of other states, we added 5 families last year who have purchased land, building houses, building homesteads. Had one this week close and had another one go into contract this week. And so we continue to grow. So to answer the question, do we want more members? Well, of course, the more the merrier. I want to set proper expectations, though. It's not what people think it is in the way of you're all moving onto one person's land and we're all living together and showering together. That's not how it works. And if you want to be involved in the decision-making process, you just got to be involved. And it's actually, pretty simple, but it's amazing to watch, Derrick. I'm going to tell you, I lean against a tree all the time and just smile to myself that this is what 15 years of hard work created. And so it empowers me.
That's such a cool feeling to sit back with. I'm sure I look forward to this with the land specifically, but with any kind of project or, project you've born and kind of helped shape, and step back and see the beautiful things coming out of it. I don't know if you mentioned the location.
Oh, I didn't. So it will be the next public event we have going on is at Perry Lake, which is just north of Lawrence, Kansas, the end of April. So it's like the 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. It's free, costs nothing. There's some classes and stuff that go on, but most of what it is us just hanging out, bartering our goods, figuring out how, who can make the best cherry cobbler in a Dutch oven. I mean, that's really what it is. So it's a big party, basically, that goes on, but it's free. Everybody show up. Some people camp in tents. Some people camp in hammocks. Some people bring RVs. Some people stay in hotels. It's all open. And I would welcome anybody to come. And you can find it on, again, Facebook under the Midwest Preparedness Project, or MeWe under the Midwest Preparedness Project.
Great. I'll include those links in there as well. So we'll put the links to Tag's YouTube channel, to freesteading.com, and of course to the links to the land. I encourage everybody to just dive in, just learn all about what's going on over in Tag's world. And I think you're doing some really important things, brother, and I'm glad to know you and to share what you're doing with my audience. And I really do look forward to this integration in whatever form it takes between Freedom Cells, Freesteading, and other projects out there. If you guys are hearing this and you're thinking, hey, I'm doing something similar, reach out to me, reach out to Tag. Let's see how we can support each other, how we can all grow, because many of us, I think, in these movements are strong, proud individualists, and I would count the two of us here among that. And yet at the same time, recognize the need for community and the need for, if we're going to survive, and not just survive, but thrive into the future in the face of some pretty difficult scenarios that are looming right on the horizon, we're going to need each other. There's no one person, one organization, one group, one property that can handle all the challenges alone. In fact, I think this is our strength, because I plan to learn from you, Tag, and some of the things that you guys have already done and incorporate that into what we're doing, and vice versa. And that's the beautiful thing, I think, between the Freedom Cells Network and Freesteading, is that we can see what our friends in other states and other countries are doing. We take inspiration from them. We adapt their models, how they work for us in our environment with our needs and our resources, and then it just continues to spread and grow. And it's amazing. I'm just grateful to be a part of this. Any closing thoughts you have, brother?
Yeah, first, just thanks to you, Derrick. You've been a leader to me, and you've been a leader to our community, and you've touched us and you didn't even know it, because when you reach out to try to find the answer, there's just not a lot out there. And so first, just thanks to you, and thanks for, having me on. To the audience, I promise you, you can do it. You just got to get committed to do it. It's not that hard. You can do it. Uncomfortable is a good place to be.
Absolutely. If you're uncomfortable, then you're probably making progress. And I think that is such a key lesson, that we are going to have to work with all kinds of people, maybe people we never thought we would work with, maybe people with different opinions. I know it's difficult for some to imagine, but if we truly want to survive and thrive, and not only that, because this isn't all doomsday. For me, this is recognizing that this is just a better way to live, right? This is what I want. Even if you take away all the conspiracy and the nastiness going on in the world, let's imagine that all disappeared. I'm still getting land. I'm still working on growing my own food. I'm still building community. And I hope you guys out there will join us in this journey together. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. My guest has been Tag. We're going to put all the links below. Please find him, dive into his work. And as always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace. You have been listening to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find the archives of our show at Pinecast, Spotify, and theconsciousresistance.com. Thank you for listening.